in late 2024, when Ukraine seemed to be wanting to escalate the war by striking into Russia with the permission of the Biden administration. I say Biden administration in inverted commas because I don't think it was Biden who sanctioned that. I think it was the actors behind him. I don't know if you know that speech Putin made where he says he has been through many U.S. administrations and spoken to many U.S. presidents. And they all have these great ideas about what they should do until the men in the black suits and briefcases come in, sit down, and tell them how things are done. And he was alluding to the deep state.
I have already talked with one US president, then another, and a third president. They come and go, but politics does not change. Do you know why? Because the power of bureaucracy is very strong. A person is elected, they come in with one set of ideas, and then people with briefcases come to them, well dressed in dark suits like mine, not with a red tie, but with a black or dark blue one. And they start explaining how things should be done.
There's a very interesting video clip of the US Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. If I find it, I will put it in this video when I'm editing it. And Mike Johnson was talking about how many times he went to speak with Biden, and he would ask Biden, why did you do this, or why did you take this action? And Biden would be totally unaware of what he was talking about. And you're saying, I know some of you think that it's because he has his dementia, but he, speaking with Biden in the moment, genuinely believed that President Biden had no idea why a certain action was taking place. And I mean, I'm missing all parts of this video, but of the clip. But he also spoke about the fact that there was this team of actors always around Biden who were trying to prevent the meeting with him and Mike Johnson. He mentioned Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and others. And he says it was his opinion that they were making decisions for Biden that Biden didn't even know about.
Can you tell us a story when you say personal observation? What kind
well,
of thing did you see?
It's public now because the Wall Street Journal got it and put it on the front page. But January a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I had been asked, I became speaker in October 2023, and there were all sorts of big national security concerns and everything going on, and I started requesting a meeting with the president because, you know, I'm kind of old school, I'm a constitutional law guy. The Speaker of the House should be able to talk to the president, especially in times of great national interest and calamity. But they wouldn't let me meet with him, and his staff kept giving me excuses. This went on for like 8 or 9 weeks. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, he doesn't have time. What are you talking about? I'm second in line of the presidency. He has time. I need to talk to him. We had, I can't say the classified parts, but we had some big national concerns at the time that I was losing sleep over. Finally, I just went to the Hill Press Corps and I said, the president is not being allowed to meet with the speaker. There's a problem. So they started putting pressure on him. Long story short, they finally relented. They invited me to the White House. I show up and I realize it's actually an ambush because it's not just me and the president. It's also Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem, you know, the CIA director, everybody. And then, so I walked in the Oval and, I know what this is. They're going to hotbox the speaker on Ukraine funding. That's what it was. This is probably third week of January. We sit down, we're in the midst of it, and the whole conversation, and I'm going, we don't need to have this conversation. The president reaches over just like this. We're sitting right next to the fireplace in the Oval, and he grabs my arm and he says, the speaker and I just need a couple minutes together. Would y'all just leave us alone? And I looked up on the faces of some of the staff standing around the wall, and they're like, oh, no, he did it. So he called it. He's the commander-in-chief. So everybody leaves, and he and I are standing awkwardly in the middle of the Oval Office, right over the rug by that coffee table. And I said, Mr. President, thanks for the moments. This is very important. I got some big national security things I need to talk to you about that I've heard and I think you know, and what do we do? But first, real quickly, Mr. President, can I ask you a question? I cannot answer this from my constituents in Louisiana. Sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? Like, I don't understand, liquefied natural gas is in great demand by our allies. Why would you do that? Because you understand, we just talked about Ukraine. You understand you're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because they got to get their gas from him, And he looks at me, stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order, 3 weeks ago. And he goes, no, I didn't do that. And he's arguing with me. I said, Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that. And he goes, oh, you talk about natural gas. Yes, sir. He said, no, you misunderstand. He said, what I did is I signed this thing we're gonna conduct a study on the effects of LNG. I said, no, you're not, sir. You paused it. I know. I have the export terminals in my state. I talked to those people this morning. This is doing massive damage to our economy, national security. It occurred to me, Barry, He was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed.
So if that is true, and I think it is, that is why I think we have seen a lot of contradictions from the US administration in 2024 especially, or throughout this war. You know, Biden said no Abrams will be sent, no F-16s will be sent, no strikes will be allowed in Russian territory. All of these statements he has walked back on. And my theory is that it's not Biden, but it's the deep state overriding it. Anyhow, at the end of 2024, that is when Ukraine got the ATACMS and they were starting strikes into Russia. Of course, those strikes were to be limited to military infrastructure, and then Ukraine started striking oil refineries. And Putin, of course, warned them that that was a red line, and despite our Western media tries to claim that Putin is soft and, you know, he bluffs, Putin doesn't bluff. Putin told them, if you continue to do this, we will go and arm your enemies.
Мы думаем на тему о том, что если кто-то считает возможным...
And so said, so done. President Putin made trips to China, I believe Vietnam, North Korea, Iran, and then to Cuba. And I'm going to come back to that. And each of those trips, he made military pacts with them. And there was an exchange of weapons and technology. The details of which, I don't know everything that was exchanged, but I know that Iran has hypersonic missiles, and I suspect most of those other allies do as well. But the one that was shrouded in the most secrecy, and when I say secrecy, I mean there's very little reporting about it, is the trip to Cuba. And this is where I start to speculate, because I haven't seen any evidence of this. But President Putin sails to Cuba on a nuclear submarine. And this was glossed over in the West. They just said, oh, it's a nuclear submarine, but there are no active warheads on it. That is besides the point. This is this is a major slap in the face for America. This harkens back to memories of the nuclear threat of the Soviet Union and the Bay of Pigs invasion, I believe under John F. Kennedy, because the Soviet Union was threatening to put Cuba on nuclear weapons. This was Putin sailing into America's backyard to arm one of America's long-standing enemies. Now, we don't know what happened, but this was coming on the heels of Putin making a threat, acting on the threat by arming America's enemies. Sails to Cuba, and you're telling me he left nothing there? I mean, I find that hard to believe. I think most likely he gave them some technology or signed a military deal or put some hypersonic missiles there. I don't know. But that was just not for show. Now, I'm straying a bit from my original point, because I know I was talking about how large-scale offenses are not possible unless there's deception in warfare. But I'm going off tangent. But one of the theories I've always had was that if Kamala was elected, I think there would be two outcomes. Either we would have been in World War III, or we would have seen a massive strike on the United States from Russian allies. Hear me out. How many of you have seen that video clip of Putin doing an interview? And he was talking about growing up on the streets of Leningrad. And he said, in various words, I mean, I quote it directly, that one thing he learned growing up in Leningrad is that if you know there's going to be a fight, make sure you hit first.
Еще 50 лет назад Ленинградская улица меня научила одному правилу. Если драка неизбежна, бить надо первым.
That translated means that's a preemptive strike. That's what he did in Ukraine. Ukraine was a preemptive strike. He saw that Zelensky brought about 125,000 of these NATO-trained Ukrainian troops on the borders of Luhansk and Donetsk, getting ready to invade. And he's no dummy. He's not going to sit around and wait for them to invade and wipe out the Donbass militia. He did the invasion preemptively. In fact, the invasion was pursuant to Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which is under self-defense, but it has been interpreted by the courts to be preemptive self-defense, which means you're allowed to strike preemptively to avoid a major attack. And the thinking behind it is that you can't wait until the enemy attacks, because in this day and age, one attack could be so devastating that you don't have the capacity to defend yourself. But there are all sorts of constraints about a preemptive strike. And I did a video about that again years ago. I'm not going to go into it now. But what I'm saying is, President Putin, based on what he said growing up in Leningrad, and based how he has acted in Ukraine, he is not going to wait for Kamala president, who has categorically said, now she doesn't say much. I mean, everything else she says is more or less a word salad, except I remember she said when she was asked on that morning show, The View, if she would do anything different from Biden, and she said that she would not.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Which means